17 years ago today, the world changed. This morning, the nation remembers that Tuesday morning when thousands of people showed up at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon for work. Hundreds of firefighters, cops, and EMTs showed up for their shifts. Hundreds of passengers boarded their flights. None of them knew they wouldn't live past 10 a.m. And on this solemn morning, the director of the FBI talked about the evolving terror threat as it stands today.
We're also very focused now on homegrown violent extremists, which are people who are largely here already in the United States, big cities, small towns, coast to coast. And these are people who are largely radicalized online. We had about 1,000 investigations into just these homegrown violent extremists. That's out of about 5,000 terrorism investigations. Doesn't include ISIS, doesn't include Al-Qaeda, doesn't include domestic terrorism even. This is a significant issue. We had about 120 terrorism-related arrests last year alone. And that's just in the arrest context.
I want to bring in MSNBC terrorism analyst Malcolm Nance. He spent decades in the Navy and in counterterrorism, and NBC News intelligence and national security reporter Ken Dilanian. Ken, let me start with you. Listening to the FBI director talking about the shift in threat. What do you make of that?
It's absolutely what I've seen over my career covering intelligence. I used to spend almost all my time focused on Al-Qaeda and drone strikes in Pakistan and the latest developments. And it's really faded as an issue because Al-Qaeda does not have the capability, people like Christopher Wray tell us, to mount a complicated 9/11 style attack. And so when Ibrahim al-Asiri, the master bomb maker, was reported killed by the CIA a few weeks ago, it wasn't even the top story of the day. It would have been several years ago. And I think that's good news. Now, the disturbing news, as Christopher Wray just told us, is that there's this homegrown threat. There are these 5,000 open FBI investigations. And we've seen those attacks, and they've killed a lot of people, but they are not an existential threat to the United States.
And Malcolm, you unfortunately have been with me almost every time we have covered one of those what we call homegrown attacks or sort of less organized attacks. And in most cases, they don't rise, as Ken says, to the level of existential. Does that mean we should feel safer today than we did 17 years ago?
Only to a certain extent. I think a better way to look at these attacks is to call them aspirational attacks. This is where people have just been infused with the belief that if they carry out some form of terrorism, whether it's planning a bombing or getting a knife or getting a car, that they can affect the world at their own level, or at least the news media output for a day or two. And this is what the FBI has to deal with. You know, back in the 80s, in the era we used to call the good old days of terrorism, where all terrorist groups were cells, and every once in a while you would have the lone wolf guy come up like the Unabomber. Now it's all lone wolves. Groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, even right-wing extremists in the United States who are organized, they get taken down very quickly. But for now, I think what we're finding is that the world of terrorism has diffused from these silos down to the individual, and it's much harder to catch.
Ken, ever since 9/11 and the 9/11 Commission and all the information that has come out, we've learned that there were intelligence community failings. It wasn't. We had more information than we knew how to communicate and do with, but we actually knew enough that if we were firing on all cylinders, 9/11 probably could have been prevented. How do you look at where we are today with respect to our intelligence gathering and sharing between our various intelligence agencies?
Well, look, I think the United States has spent billions of dollars and has flooded the zone on terrorism and has surveillance and has analysts looking at this problem from every angle, such that the people I talk to do not think that Al-Qaeda could carry out a similar attack. It would be detected. But you've seen that failure of imagination in other areas, perhaps the Russia intervention in our politics. So it's still an issue in terms of intelligence failure. But on terrorism, it seems like, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
But when I talk to officials privately, they say, look, we've made huge progress on this. We've turned a corner. We can't say that publicly, though, because an attack could come.
Right, and then everybody will say, didn't you say you had all the information? But Malcolm, one thing we know from 9/11, prior to 9/11, is our intelligence bodies weren't sharing important information that could have helped figure out 9/11 before it happened.
Well, that's true, but you have to understand, pre-9/11, and many people don't understand this. Lawrence Wright did a good job in his book on the towers.
The looming towers.
There was the looming towers. There was an enormous effort going on in secret, the secret war against al-Qaeda that started in 2005, 2006. I ran an al-Qaeda simulation group for special operations Tier 1 operators in Coronado between 1997 and 2001. We were on top of that mission. What we were not on top of was at the national level the belief that these people would carry out a strategic level attack intended to completely change the fabric of the world. And that's what they did. But at the tactical level, we had seen aircraft as weapon systems as a viable attack methodology. The Israelis shot down a Libyan airliner in the 1970s, believing that that's exactly what it was. People flew airplanes into the White House. So it wasn't so much a failure of intelligence and intelligence sharing. And I'll be honest, I think as soon as the Bush crew got on board, their mindset shifted to China. They threw terrorism right out the window. And I'm sorry, but it did lead to some of the failings that we had.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.